All right.
Okay, welcome to another podcast from the Agile Cool Kids. We have Francesca, Agnieszka, and Blaj again with me, Don, and we have a nice topic to talk about today. So, who's got our topic actually?
I was thinking in our first 3 minutes, are there borders to Agile? Or Agile can be literally implemented everywhere?
What do you mean by
Okay.
borders, Agnieszka?
Okay, and Blaj, you had something specific as well, didn't you?
By borders, I was thinking about, are there processes they have to run in a, let's say, traditional project management style with milestones and predictability and really set in stones stages. So I was thinking in the direction of processes. I was thinking in the direction of industries and different areas like in pharma industry. And if yes, how much can Agile be implemented to vaccine research?
Well, yeah, for me, what I was thinking, I connected self-organizing teams to sport teams, but that probably has to deal with the maturity of the team. Are they prepared to be self-organized? Are they trained, even though we have the prime directive that we have the right people in the right places? And I was just sharing a story about how when Real Madrid had Galacticos, they had Zidane, Figo, all these big names, and they were told they do not really need to be coached or coached that much. They just go on the field and do their job. And if we transfer it to the same sport, but to a lower level, they probably need more guidance.
Isn't it what Agile is about adjusting the tools, methods to the people and their level you have there? As opposite to having fixed processes and fixed tools, they are perfect for every team, every person, and every situation.
And what is the role of the coach like in that situation? Then what's the coach there to do?
Well, of course, it really depends first on the maturity of the team and then probably the coaching style of the coach itself. If we look at some coaches in EuroLeague, they mostly adopt the, let's say, Yugoslav approach, like Željko Obradović, shouting at their players, really commanding control, directing everything. It's coach first and then the team. And then we are in some kind of a pyramid and command and control culture. While if we know that we have professionals in our team, we should let them do their work or their job.
And what's the role of the coach then?
The role of the coach would be to remove impediments that they have. It would be like some kind of a team lead, and of course, helping with communication, asking questions, giving them choices to resolve those questions and issues that they have.
It is so. When I've been a coach before, I've kind of made a mistake by saying things like, "Oh yeah, we as an agile coach, we're kind of like a sports coach. That's what we do. We come in and we help the team." In my mind, it's what Blaj was talking about, helping and supporting in the team. But sometimes, well, I guess maybe more than sometimes, people think the coach is the first thing you described as someone coming in and shouting at people and telling them what to do and organizing everything. And because I think there are some or many sports coaches like that, football coaches, the image of, I don't know much about football, but the image of Alex Ferguson on the sidelines, shouting his head off and pointing and frowning, and that seems very much sort of command and control, isn't it? Like a general. And I think maybe there's a lot of that out there, but I don't think that works very well in sports teams or in our teams, in our business teams. And maybe what I was reflecting on was, a lot of coaching style started in about the 1950s, I think it was. There was someone who wrote a book about teaching people to ski. It was called Inner Skiing. Francesca, you know this one?
I've heard of it. Yes. Yeah.
And it was an approach to teaching skiing by not focusing on where people put their skis or how they're standing, but talking to them about what they're thinking. How are you thinking about skiing? And how do you feel you're going faster, and what's slowing you down? And how are you turning? Not telling them how to turn, but asking them how are they turning, and in this way getting them to reflect themselves on the problem. And it was such a success that the same person wrote another book called Inner Tennis, where he used exactly the same principles just for tennis, even though he wasn't a tennis player. And that became a very big success. And that's where tennis coaches now, most of them follow those ideas about, they ask people things like, they ask them things like, how do you think your backhand is going? And they might say, oh, not terrible, not very good. Say, how are you? When is the first time you see the tennis ball when it comes to you? When do you notice the tennis ball is coming at you? And get them to really reflect on how they're playing, not what they're doing. So in my mind, that's what a coach really should be, is helping people to reflect on how they're thinking and how they're doing it, not what they're doing really. So maybe we've gone off a little bit on agile borders, but we've gone into coaching. But that's what that's what I'm thinking about. The nature of coaching now is that. But how does this get back to agile borders?
For me, maybe it reflects just in one thing, that whenever we get good results, we tend to think that the coaching is good. And we know Alex Ferguson got great results, and he had the hairdryer treatment, just shouting at a person, very close to him. And yesterday, when I was walking my dogs, I started thinking how some mission statements really tend to be different than the metrics used for success of the company. And that's maybe the problem with adopting some kind of an agile approach, because people tend to see it as too soft or not bringing results, because the results were brought by command and control culture. And when I'm talking about the metrics and the mission or value statement, sometimes companies say we want to offer the optimal solution to our clients. And instead of measuring how many optimal and non-optimal solutions they measure it in money, of course, in revenue, which is completely different than offering an optimal solution. And that's why I think if we are focused on the result, we tend to look at the history and we tend to imitate it, what worked in the past 30, 40 years, and just tend to go with it.
Yeah.
I was thinking of two additional things actually when you said that, Blaj. So one thing is what to measure and what is meaningful to measure and what is actually not, what is not bringing us the the meaningful result that we need to measure, the meaningful data that could help us understand if this is working or not. And on the other side, and this is something that is happening to me at work nearly every day, is that people don't really know the difference between output and outcomes. And they cannot define their own outcomes. So if they cannot do that, how can they find meaningful measurement to see if whatever they're doing is actually getting them closer to their outcomes, or if it's absolutely not the case? And measuring how much money a company makes, it's not necessarily a measure of how closer we are getting to the outcome, or how many times, how many PowerPoint presentations do we prepare every year. Does that give us anything tangible, anything meaningful to understand if we're getting closer to our outcomes?
Can you please, because I got so excited when you started your sentence, because from my experience, I struggled so much when people don't understand the difference between causality and correlation. And that's so common. Okay, we got a success, we have few factors, and then as we have few factors, it means be the causality. And no. In my study, we had a really super great as professor as well, the way he was teaching. And he said it was his favorite example. We have in Poland saying that a certain bird brings babies. And he said it has to be true because in the areas when we have the biggest amount of those birds, we have the biggest amount of newborns and the biggest amount of babies. So it has to be true that those birds are bringing babies. And that's for me such a beautiful example of the huge difference between causality and correlation, and extremely careful to differentiate those two. It's really causality, how to make sure, in the sense, how to check whether it's causality. And you were talking, Francesca, about outcome and output. So I was thinking, could you please, I am not sure if it's clear enough for myself. Could you please maybe say more sentences with some example? What's the difference?
Of course. So starting from outcomes, outcomes are like the description of hopefully a near future where your current issue is no longer there, or where there's a change, there's an improvement to your current situation that you wish to change, obviously, right? So how do you describe that? Let's put it in quotes, a perfect future, the unicorns and rainbows situation. You might not get to the unicorns and rainbows, but close enough maybe is good enough for you, right? So the description of that new situation where, for example, this and this are now there, which are not here today, or this and that are no longer there, and they are bothering me today, so I don't want them there anymore, or any sort of change, right? So that would be the description of the outcome. An output is just a result. It's just like a task, something that you do. Does that task get you closer to where you want to go? So just because you need to pitch an idea to your CEO, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to prepare a PowerPoint presentation. That's not the only way. What do you need to get the okay? What is the pitch about? What would you like to get after the pitch? What is the description of that future that you want to get? So how do you get there? The how you get there might be a series of tasks that need to be measured to see if you get closer and closer to that outcome that you want to get. Does that make sense?
Makes completely sense for me, and thank you for explaining. I gained more clarity.
Thank you.
It's for me. I've got a cartoon in my head. There's a cartoon that I know. I should dig it out. Which is, there's a 10 people are shooting arrows all over the place, and they're shooting arrows all over the place, and they're shooting hundreds and hundreds of arrows, but they're all over the place. And the next window in the cartoon is one person shooting the target in the bullseye. One arrow. Yeah. So you can have a lot of output that is zero value and has no outcome, no benefit. Yeah. And I'm thinking a lot about software, right? So, lots of people put a lot of effort into writing and testing and controlling and releasing software that isn't a success and doesn't work or isn't used. Right. So they've made a lot of output there, but there's no impact to the customer or the business. So it has no outcome. Conversely, you might have one small change in an application or a website that unlocks a lot of value for customers. So even a small amount of effort could allow someone to do lots of things. Any examples there? Only one.
I'm just thinking about when I was younger and played Sunday League football. And when I was covering, I was a defender, I was covering a striker, and he was running like left, right. I was following him. Then my coach just took me to the side and says, "Why are you running? Where are you running? It doesn't matter how far you run, how many kilometers you run. If you do not know where you run and where the ball is, it doesn't even matter. So the kilometers doesn't matter, but the value you bring to the team matters." And that's where I would say that sometimes the metrics and the statistics in the sports or even in companies fail to show your value to the team and what you bring to the team. And yes, there are many factors, and if we just look at the outputs, we don't really know what the outcomes are.
I agree. Absolutely.
If we can go back to the idea of... Sorry, Francesca, go ahead.
No, sorry. Don,
I just wanted to bring it back to...
Another idea.
Okay, I was just going to bring us back to this idea of Agile and its borders. So one aspect that often is brought up is that, Agile is great and everything, but it can't fix everything. And it's not appropriate everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true. There are things that, if you're trying to discover or evolve or bring all the risks out of a project or a program or an application or a company, then Agile is nice for that. But if you're already in a place where it's fairly low risk, there's not a lot to be discovered, and it's fairly easy to deliver, you just have to put in time and effort, then maybe Agile's not any better. And I'm thinking of if you guys know the Kneffin framework.
No.
Oh, okay. So this is a very useful model. It's called the Kneffin framework, and it's a really difficult name because it's a Welsh name. Thanks. Yeah, Cuinefin. Yeah, and it was first put forward by a person called Professor Dave Snowden, who was he's quite a character in the Agile world. I've actually seen him a couple of times in conferences in London, and it's a fascinating idea. I don't want to go into it too much now because it is quite deep. But basically, what he says is that different systems in the world behave differently, and if you're in an environment where the systems are behaving in one way or another, then we have to behave differently. So his example is, the first one is, some systems are very simple and easy. Some problems are easy. Some environments are easy, like baking a cake. What's the system? What's the process of thinking about baking cake? What do we do? Yeah, and the answer is, what's
we
the
follow
process?
the recipe.
Yeah, you follow a recipe. Yeah, you get a recipe from somewhere and you follow it, and that's true now, and was true 100 years ago. It was true 1,000 years ago. It's probably going to be true in another 100 years. You just follow the recipe, and any person who's fairly decent in a kitchen can make a cake. You're not suddenly going to make sausage rolls or or a pie or something, right? It's going to be a cake. But then there are other systems where it's not so easy, like dentistry, right? You probably don't want to do your own dentistry. You don't want to follow a recipe to do dentistry, right? You probably want to get someone who's experienced and knowledgeable. But when you go to the dentist, probably 95% of the time, you know what's going to happen. You know what the outcome will be, right? Either you're going to get a filling, or you're going to get a crown, or you're going to lose a tooth, or whatever it is, right? It's a high level of predictability. Yeah, but then there are other systems. He keeps going. There's 4 altogether. There are other systems where the system you're in is not predictable, or very much less predictable. So you kind of have to discover the solutions. So a lot of software development is like this, because, as we know, requirements change over time, businesses change over time, technology changes over time. You kind of have to discover your way forward. Yeah. And the last one is called the chaos region, where anything can happen and there's no rules, and so you just have to try something, like winning the lottery. Yeah. Did I get that right, guys?
Would that be the framework and at the same time an answer to where are the borders of Agile? Because it resonates with me that way.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So if something is if the process of delivery is actually quite simple and obvious and understood, like baking a cake, you don't need a stand-up. You don't need iterations to bake a cake.
And
But
from my understanding, it's sorry, Blaž.
No. I just wanted to add that still you can add some agile elements like self-organizing teams, because even though I worked as a student in industry, we were making boats. You can have a micromanager, or you can have somebody that lets you self-organize. People know what to do, and you just finish the project. So yeah, I think you can add it like a little bit of spices everywhere, So Agnieszka, continue.
I was thinking that my reflection on that was it's not limited to the process. It's very much bound what you want to achieve. If you want to achieve the same cake, you want to achieve the same results as much as possible. That's the way to go. If you want as your goal to win a world championship in cake baking, it's not really very likely. It's possible, but not very likely that repeating a recipe will bring you there.
That's an amazing point.
Yeah, I think you would have a recipe that's very ornamental. So you're adding extra things, you're better icing, better quality ingredients, perhaps, and some artistry in how to do it. But the basic process of how to get a cake is the same, right? And now we're just talking about the quality or the artistry of the cake.
And what if we were talking about improving the taste of the cake or improving the consistency of the whole thing, you know? Or maybe we wanted to make it faster. Maybe the outcome is that we need to produce cakes in batches, right? Because we need to sell them fast because we have a high demand for those cakes. So maybe we need to change some elements in our original system that already works, like for example, an industrial oven, or we need to have teams working in parallel to bake a lot of cakes at the same time, and everyone should follow the same recipe.
Yeah.
Perfect. But we also need to make sure that we have the right amount of flour at all times because that is needed. A number of eggs or non-eggs, whatever we use for the cake, and all the elements that we need, all the ingredients, right? So at that point, we are applying some sort of changes to our original recipe or to the whole process that we were using, right? So at that point, there's always room for improvement. So even in the first quadrant of the Kinevin, where everything is known and there's not much to be, you know, to be left out in the unknown area, well, we could still improve. So maybe in that area, as Blaž was saying, in that area, it is possible that Agile could work.
Wow, amazing matrix.
Yes.
I was just thinking, bringing it back to Francesca and also Don, then we can be talking about transparency and visibility. Something is, we talked about visibility. We can all read the recipe and follow it, but we do not understand why we need maybe baking powder, how all the ingredients work together. And then maybe, of course, the best thing that we can adopt is an agile mindset, even when training employees, even if we have to just delegate the tasks to explain to them. And of course, to give them the opportunity to go from shu to haturi in what they are doing, even though the process is very simple.
Yeah. So I think this is fascinating because, I think Francesca is right, is that the minute we think we want to improve, or the minute we want to get faster, or then suddenly we're in the agile world again, where we need the feedback, we need the trial and error, we need the experiments, right? So that's where I think Aneska's question is really interesting, that for something, if you never want to improve it, or you never think about anything, you just keep going as it is, and you don't want to change, maybe that's the answer. If you don't want to change, then fine, you don't need to change. You just keep going with baking the cake you always did. Right? But the minute we have to deal with change,
and that's brilliant, because I typed down for myself how my answer or for me emerged to the question whether, and if yes, where are the borders of Agile? Is those two words, actually three, I put down for me is what's your goal? It's consistency or changes. And that's your roadmap, what would bring you with highest probability there. If you want consistency, you don't need iteration, you don't need changes, you don't need so much, or probably not at all agile. If you want different results, you have a perfect cake recipe, but like you, Francesca, said, you need to produce in batches. You need, or you have different oven, or you need to make this cake suitable for production line. So in any situation, when you aim for changes, for some adaptation, Agile is your perfect way to go.
May I challenge that again?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to challenge another part of it. Sometimes you may not look for change, but change comes to you.
Well.
Yep.
Yes, I think it has to deal with fixed and growth mindset. And I think you have a saying, we are reinventing the wheel. But if we are cynical, we say, okay, it has been around for centuries and centuries. But every time I see a new commercial for new wheels, I say, for new tires, I say, okay, yes, we are reinventing the wheel. And I was thinking also about in Slovenia, we say like, you are not inventing boiling water. Of course, like not something new, but you can invent a new way to boil water faster if you want to change. So
Yes.
you are not changing the product, but changing the process.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. I had a look at my watch, and I feel I'm curious how you feel, but I feel really satisfied with the answers we created today. How about you?
I love it.
I think I got some insights both from Francesca and Donald, and also from you, Agnieszka, and I loved our discussion, and I will bring you back to Francesca since I interrupted her.
Oh no, Blasha, that was good. That was good. I have one more thing maybe to think about, because your example, Agnieszka, of the storks and the babies and correlation and the fact that okay, there are so many storks, so there must be so many babies, right? If it stops there, then of course that there might be the misunderstanding that lots of storks means lots of babies. But what if you use Agile in that as well, and you turn it into an experiment, and you use some sort of methodologies or frameworks like, I don't know, lean startup or whatever other thing that you can use for experiments, and then you actually try your assumptions and see and measure the results and get to the outcome that you were looking for. Can you actually get to the outcome? Can you actually prove that lots of storks mean lots of babies? If you cannot, then you need to go back and revise your experiment. And that's the scientific method, so nothing new there. But it's also used in the agile world.
I was laughing because my brain in my brain emerged some provocative ideas. It's amazing approach as long as you don't go in the founding phase and got investors, convincing them you have a perfect method to increase rate of birth. How many babies we can have? It's you just need 2 more storks. So as long as you don't go into foundings and investors, yeah.
And what if you Sorry, I just wanted to just add to the joke. What if you tell the investors that you need more babies to have more storks?
But the way to do that is to build more houses, which is maybe what you wanted all along.
Yes.
Invest your money in building houses, and you will get more storks and probably more babies. That's the root cause analysis. I wanted to leave you with one last thought for me, which is that what we've found here, or what we've reminded ourselves, is that Agile is there to help with change, to help understand how to change and what the best, what outcomes can we get when we change. It's a scientific. I was going to say, it's a scientific way of understanding change, but actually I would say more it's a human way of dealing with change, because humans naturally will fall down on I wonder why that's happening, let's investigate, or let's try something else. And this then brings it back to what the whole issue here is, that we've been dealing with a management style from 100 years ago that was set up not to change. the command and control system is there to stop changes happening and to have consistency in a production line, right? And at that time, it was successful, of course, but not many people work on production lines anymore. We're all working in knowledge economy jobs, where it's not a production line; it is a creative, team effort, and the same management style just doesn't work. We have to deal with change. We have to allow change to happen and allow graceful change, which is where Agile brings its value. And I don't see that as the exception. I see that as the norm. That's what normal people do. I see the management style from the production line as being the outlier. Yeah, and perhaps it came from the military ideas as well, because they needed to work in a particular way. But if we go back further and looking at different places, that the idea of the scientific method or how people, improve things comes naturally. And I'm thinking of like thousands of years ago, carpenters and stonemasons and, sailors and shipwrights and all that. How did they learn their trade? They have to learn and experiment and try things. So I think I would rather say it as the border between Agile and traditional ways. I feel the traditional way is an island, and Agile is all around it, because everything else in the world, is behaving like that. It's behaving in that way of, oh, let's try an experiment here. Let's research this and find out and try something new. We just have to remember that.
Yeah, and the nature is as much about replicate, but at the same time is minimum as much about changes and to adapt.
Yeah.
And not replicate in the sense there is not something like perfect replication in the nature.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Only evolution.
The ability to change is built in.
Exactly.
I have just one last thought before I stop. I think that we have some struggles between our routines, where our brain is on autopilot and, let's say, mostly resting, and then telling people and employees of constant changes, constant improvements, doing things differently. So I think this is the biggest struggle. Do we want to, let's say, live our work life on autopilot, or do we want to be a little bit on our toes and, of course, start improving and changing?
That's a great point.
Wonderful. Okay.
Sounds like a summary for me.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, once again, it's been a great conversation. Yeah. Who'd like to close?
I just would like to say that all these conversations energize me so much. So I hope that we find another very good time for all of us to record the third episode of this podcast.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
I am very much in.
Yes, it's an energizing way to spend these hours with you.
Yeah.
And of course, we hope the people watching or people listening to this also get some value out of that, out of our ideas and conversation. So let us know in the comments if you do. It'd be great to hear what you think of what we're doing here. So I think it's time to say goodbye. So goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
Bye. It was a lovely time. See you next time.